Is Brett Baty playing himself into a demotion back to AAA? We'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You could also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Tylor Megill made his return off the injured list on Monday. I thought he threw the ball really well. Did give up a couple of runs in the first inning, but that wasn't all his fault. It was 3 consecutive hits, but Brandon Nimmo did not field the ball cleanly. That ultimately allowed 2 runners to advance into scoring position. Then the third hit cashed them both in. So you have 1 earned run there, 1 unearned run. Other than that, though, Megill really cruised. Second inning, he struck out the side. Third inning, he retired the side in order. The fourth inning, he did issue a leadoff walk, and leadoff walks always come back to kill you. If you actually look this year, this was a stat I tweeted out today. Walks in general have really killed the Mets this season. They have the worst walk rate of any staff in all of baseball. Going into the game, it was 4.44 walks per 9 from the Mets pitching staff. Now, put that into context. It's a 9-inning game. If you're walking 4.4 batters per 9, you're basically walking a batter every other inning. So that's not an easy way to win. If you look at the top 5 teams as far as the leaders in issuing the most walks, it's all bad teams. The Mets, the Rockies, the Astros, the Marlins, and the White Sox. The one team in there that's better than the rest, the Astros, they've started to pitch better, and that's why they're winning games. So you really have to look at this as a major issue for the Mets. And this week, I will be talking about the loss of Francisco Alvarez and what it's meant to the Mets, not just with his bat, but losing him to behind the plate defensively. And I think it's part of what's going on here because he is a good framer. But overall, when the walk rate's that high, it doesn't matter if Alvarez was behind the dish. The Mets are issuing too many walks, and they would be whoever's catching. So you really need to see these pitchers clean it up. Having Adrian Hauser out of the rotation is one thing that could help that. Jose Budo was walking a lot of guys, but you really need to see some guys hone in on throwing strikes. And I thought Megill did a great job of that in this start. Altogether, he goes 5 innings, allowed 4 hits. So it was the 3 hits in the first. He then had that leadoff walk in the 4th inning that he issued, and that run came into score on a double by Kyle Manzardo, which was the 4th hit of the day. But then he strands Manzardo. So if he didn't have that leadoff walk, and if Nimmo fields a ball cleanly, he might have only given up 1 run in this start. Obviously, it looks worse, gives up 3, 2 of them earned. But overall, 7 strikeouts in 5 innings, only 2 walks. I think that's a pretty good start here for Megill. I think if he was a little bit more in the swing of things with the Mets, and it wasn't his first start off of rehab, he might have gone out there to try to get you through 6. He was at 86 pitches through 5, so he was pretty economical, all things considered. I thought, again, really good start from him. And what's crazy about Megill is how he's evolved, because if you remember when he came up, he was a guy, it's almost like what we saw from Tyler Stewart last year, the Mets pitching prospect, the guy who's 6'8", who was just mowing down hitters in high A with fastballs. That was Megill before he came up to the Mets, but he was doing it in AAA, where he could throw his fastball 90% of the time and just get by with it because he's got great extension. The big guy throws hard. Well, when he came up, he had to find other pitches. And so he was working on a changeup and a slider, and he really developed those throughout his rookie season and found some success. But now he's got a 6-pitch mix. I mean, he threw 6 different offerings in this game. Fastball still 50% usage, but he's working a cutter in, a splitter, the American spork, as they say, a slider, a curveball, and a sweeper. He got 3 strikeouts on this split. It's definitely a really good pitch for him because as a guy who has always been predicated on the fastball, now you just adjust the grip and try to throw it like you're throwing a fastball and just watch that pitch and have the bottom drop out from it and you get some swings and misses. He struck out Andres Gimenez on a splitter twice today, and then the third strikeout came on a fastball. The cutter, good pitch to throw strikes with, maybe get some ground balls, get in on some guys' hands. And then between the slider, the curveball, and the sweeper is trying to give you different variations of a breaking ball. For a guy that hasn't always had the best slider, now if you have 3 different variations, it just keeps the hitters off balance a little bit. They don't know what's coming. They can't really just key in on, all right, 3 pitches. Now it's a 6-pitch mix. A lot can really go from that. And still predicate on throwing that fastball, that should allow him to be able to still pound the zone, keep them guessing. I think McGill could be a really nice pitcher for the Mets this year. I think he's definitely improved, and I'm excited to see him now get some time in this rotation. Carlos Mendoza has said he is in the rotation. This is not a spot start. I think Hauser is absolutely a spot start on Tuesday, and he could be removed. And at some point with the way Jose Quintana's thrown the baseball as of late, there is always a chance, not necessarily right away, but whenever Kodai Senga comes back, maybe he would be in a precarious situation. But the guys that I think are pretty locked into spots right now, obviously Severino and Minaya, and Christian Scott for the time being. But I think McGill's a guy that if provided with health, he's going to be in this rotation all year. And I think he's going to have some pretty good results. So that was the one positive sign we could take from the game. The problem, the Mets can't hit. So here it is again. You go up against a good team, and the bats fall completely silent. They were 0 for 4 with runners in scoring position, which tells you 2 things. 1, they didn't get the big hit when they needed one. 2, they didn't have a lot of opportunities to get the hit. And you sort of knew early that this game was not going to go the Mets' way, as JD Martinez led off the second inning with a double, and then he gets erased on a double play where Starling Marte ripped one back into the pitcher. Ben Lively makes a great play on it. He gets Martinez in a rundown. Martinez doing the best he can to try to allow Marte to advance to second. And in that process, he gets tagged, and then Marte gets thrown out at first. So a double play on a hard hit ball after a double. That's when you sort of knew not going to be the best game for the Mets. And Ben Lively did throw the ball well. He's had a lot of success for the Guardians this year. That bullpen in Cleveland is great, but the Mets had to find a way to put some runs on the board. And their biggest opportunity leads us into our overall topic of the day, which is discussing the struggles from Brett Baty, because he had a rough day at the plate, 0 for 4, 3 strikeouts. And there was one chance the Mets had in the 6th inning when Ben Lively was at the end of his rope. Pete Alonso, Brennan Nimmo, they each got hits off of him. With 1 out, he faced JD Martinez, got a big strikeout there, and then they went to the bullpen. So here comes Brett Baty. Actually, excuse me, here comes Tyrone Taylor. Taylor walked. Baty comes up with the bases loaded. And you just want a base hit. That's all you need. Just get a knock. And it was a horrible at bat. Just awful. Gets a fastball in over the heart of the plate, looks at it, can't pull the trigger. Then he gets was it a splitter? I think it was a splitter. The pitch bounced. It was a splitter. But it bounced on the plate, and you could say, oh, it's a tough pitch to come back from after a fastball, hard to lay off. I get that, but the pitch did not start as a strike. It didn't. It started low and out of the zone, and then it finished in the dirt, and he swings through it. Now he's in an 0-2 hole. He has no chance, and they throw a fastball up. He tries to catch up to it, can't do it, strikes out on a foul tip, and that kills you. That was the opportunity. Brett Baty, if he comes through in that spot, and he rips a double down the line, the Mets win that game. If you have Mark Vientos in there, who knows? He might even run into a home run in that at bat. But instead, it's Baty, and he just had no chance. And we've been seeing that far too often, where Brett Baty just looks lost at the plate. There has been some good games mixed in. The game I was at on Sunday, he got an RBI hit and he walked a couple of times. So that was a solid performance. But there is a hole in Brett Baty's swing, and I'm going to tell you exactly what that hole is in the next segment and why it might make sense to send it down to the minor leagues and get that ironed out so he can come up, hopefully, and reclaim his position as the starting third baseman of the Mets, and he can actually hit and maintain that position for the long term. So I want to talk about what that hitch is in the swing and what the results have been so far this year for Baty in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Are you struggling to close deals? B2B selling is tougher than it's ever been. That's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers to drive higher revenue and to increase sales performance. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyer, surface key signals, and shows you hidden allies so you can find those buyers that are most likely to convert. Fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon and get started. Today, I had a very active morning engaging with our Locked On Mets insiders through Subtext. This is our texting service, and I was sending information all the prospects who have been promoted over the weekend, roster updates when Grant Hartwig was optioned for Tyler McGill, when Johan Ramirez was traded to the Dodgers for cash, when Joey Wendell was outright released. So there was a ton to update you on, and the Locked On Mets insiders got that information first. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider to get all the updates, to ask questions, to get the starting 9 lineup graphics sent to your phone each day, or to be a part of our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, make sure you find the link in the episode description or to subtext.com/lockedonmets. So what is wrong with Brett Baty? You look at his numbers on the season, and it's way too similar to last year. He's hitting 228. Last year, he hit 212. He's got a 278 on base. Last year's on base percentage was 275. Slug identical at 323 each year. His OPS is 611. Last year was 598. He is just not swinging the bat well at the major league level, and it's getting to the point where you're starting to really look at him and say, something's got to give. Now, he flashed in the beginning of the season, something that we all thought maybe he was going to come around and be a really solid hitter for the Mets. He was batting .305 prior to his hamstring injury with a .359 on base, a .373 slug. So he was never really driving the baseball, but at least he was hitting for a high average. His strikeout rate was 18.8%. Walk rate was around 6%. He actually has improved his walk rate since coming back from the injury, but that's the only thing that's improved. That does not offset what he's done swinging the bat, where he's 178 for an average, 259 on base, 288 slug, and a strikeout rate of 28%. Now, I saw a lot of people today, as all of the Brett Baty stories are coming out. If you had to wonder if this is going to be a decision the Mets are going to make soon, watch the beat reporters tell this story tonight. Anthony DiComo, Tim Healy, both of them. How the Mets have a decision to make, and how Carlos Mendoza only guaranteed that this roster alignment was going to hold through the road trip. Then something could give. Mark Vientos has done all he could to hold on to a spot, and I just can't imagine them looking at this road trip of what we've seen so far and saying, you know what, the problem there is Vientos. Let's send him right back down. Baty's the everyday guy. Let's bring up Iglesias. Brett Baty would have to have 2 unbelievable games for that to happen, and I think if he does have those games, the Mets would just stick with the platoon. But I don't have confidence that he's going to have those games because his struggles are just that pronounced. In these articles about him getting demoted, I saw a strikeout rate of 44% in May. From my math, it's 39%. I don't know if they were calculating strikeout percentage based on at-bats, which would be 44% instead of plate appearances, which is how you actually calculate it. Regardless, 39%, 44%, 47%, doesn't matter. The dude's striking out almost 40% of the time or over 40% of the time. That's a problem. And you look at his expected batting average on the season. Is he getting unlucky? No. He's actually a little bit fortunate. 203 is the expected batting average. His expected slug is 332. He's hitting the ball hard only around 30% of the time, which ranks him among the bottom 15 for the worst hitters in all of baseball. He's still batting .296 against the fastball, but there was a point in time this season where he was hitting over .400 against the fastball. So that's dropped off, and he's hitting in the 160s against breaking and off-speed pitches. So it's just a complete adventure every time he steps in the box right now. He's seen a spike in his weak contact percentage this year. And now we have bat tracking info. And I think Anthony DiComo in his article cited the bat tracking data because there is a stat now called squared up contact percentage. So how often are you squaring up the baseball? Brett Baty at 19.1% has the worst mark among all 220 qualified hitters. Nearly 15% league average when it comes to squaring up the baseball. So what is going on here? Because he swings the bat very hard. His average bat speed of 73.1 miles per hour is above average. But you have to do more than just swing the bat hard. You've got to have accuracy with the barrel. That's the thing. It's not just about swinging the bat hard. You got to find the barrel. And I was talking to Aram Layden about Brett Baty. Actually, it's probably been a couple weeks now since we discussed it, because he noticed at Citi Field, Aram Layden, for those of you who don't know, came on the show about a month ago to talk about prospects. He is a prospect expert. I don't know anybody who devotes the amount of time that Aram does to watching video on all the minor league prospects and coming out with his top 100 and his top 15 for each team. And he was very high on Brett Baty. He has a lot of stock in Brett Baty, quite literally, because I think he has a lot of Brett Baty cards too. But he really bought into him. He had him as a top 20 prospect in all of baseball prior to coming up and making his debut. And so, or prior to actually last season. And he saw a clear hole in his swing. And now I've been keyed into it. So I've been looking at it ever since. He talked about a premature weight shift forward, causing the bat to drag. So what does that mean? Brett Baty has a leg kick. Shout out to Dugout Mugs, by the way, for my little visual aid here on YouTube if you're watching. I'm a righty, so we'll see how this works, as I'm going to try to go left-handed, not only because that's Baty and also because my microphone's on this side. But if you think about it, all right, so Brett Baty's in the box. He's got his leg kick. If his body is shifting forward on his leg kick, which you'll notice if you're watching him now, he comes and there's just that premature, he's got too much weight on his front foot. What does that do to the barrel? If you're looking on YouTube, you'll see it, but it holds the barrel back. His body is forward. His bat is lagging behind. Then you come through, you're going to have a lot of rollovers. You're going to have pop-ups. He is not in sync with his swing. He needs to get to a point where the load, everything's in one motion. That 73 mile per hour bat speed, it's all firing at the same time. Right now, he's pretty much just all arms, and he's not getting his legs into it because they're not connected. That's what he has to fix. It is a clear swing adjustment. And he talked about over the offseason, it was about getting his top hand stronger. I imagine it's all tied together, because if you think about it, again, if your body is getting out in front and the bat is dragging behind, what's your top hand doing? Your top hand's kind of falling out. That top hand's not strong. So I think it's all connected for Brett Baty here. And he needs to be able to iron this out. Hopefully it can happen at the big league level, but he might have to do a complete overhaul of his swing and change his pre-setup. I think, honestly, not that anyone should be necessarily taking tips from Jeff McNeil right now when it comes to swinging a bat, but I actually think if you look at Jeff McNeil's swing and then the physical gifts that Brett Baty has, if you combine the two, you might have a really good hitter, because Jeff McNeil, with this same bat tracking data, yes, he is not a shining endorsement of the metric as far as getting results, because his average bat speed is 67.7 miles per hour. It's among the 12 worst hitters in baseball when it comes to how hard he's swinging the bat. But you look at contact percentage, the squared up contact percentage. He's getting squared up contact 35.8% of the time, which is higher than the 33.4% league average. And you look at his swing length. Jeff McNeil short to the ball is 6.9 compared to a average swing length of 7.3. Compare that to Brett Baty at 7.6. His swing is getting long, partially due to, I believe, the way he has his timing off with that load. If you look at Jeff McNeil, how Jeff McNeil swings the bat, he doesn't have a leg kick. He sits and he just cocks the bat, and he's in like a preload before the pitch is even thrown. And then you get a little toe tap for timing, and then he's short to the ball. If Brett Baty were to eliminate the leg kick and just trust that he doesn't need the leg kick to get into his power, because I don't believe he does. I think he's got more than enough strength as an athlete to be able to drive the baseball without the leg kick. And you know what? If he's hitting more doubles instead of home runs because he eliminates a leg kick, by all means, at least you're not striking out a ton and rolling over a ton. If you're making solid contact with the baseball, we talk all about Brett Baty's ground ball rate. And yes, that's an issue. But if he's hitting ground balls at 107 miles per hour because he's squaring up the baseball, those are going to find holes a lot of times, and he's going to hit for a high average. When he's hitting ground balls at 75 miles per hour, he's going to get out every single time. And I think Brett Baty is at his best when he's able to spray the baseball and when he is driving line drives all over the place. That's what he has to get back to. And I think there is a clear adjustment that can take place here. Remember, 2022 and 89 games played in Double-A, when Brett Baty was the best hitter in that league and shot up prospect boards, he hit 19 home runs and 22 doubles. And if you extrapolate out what he did over that amount of plate appearances, and you then take that rate and put it over 650 plate appearances, would have been 31 home runs and 36 doubles. So there is a lot of power that Baty can tap into, but he's not getting to it right now. So it might be best to send him down to the minor leagues and let him figure it out there. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Should the Mets demote Brett Baty? What would that look like on the big league roster? And are they going to make this decision very soon? So we'll get to all of that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. With today's Mets game, you can look at Adrian Houser's strikeouts. It's set at 3. So you can go more or less on that. That's too dangerous for me. I'm not looking at that number because I don't know how many innings he's pitching. So I can't say he's going to strike out more than 3. I don't think he will, but that makes me nervous. It's so low. At the same time, to go less than that, if he ends up pitching 5, he might run into 3 strikeouts or even 4, and you might lose there. So don't look at Houser. I like Francisco Lindor today. He was 0 for 4 in the first game of this series, his first time playing in Cleveland since 2019. I think he's going to have a big day, and all you got to look at is the hits at 1.5. So if you take more there, if he has a 2-hit day, had a 2-hit day on Sunday, all of a sudden, that's the first part of your entry that you're winning. I also love JD Martinez. Total bases 1.5. Had a double today. I think he's due to hit a home run. So I love that one. And then we're talking about Brett Baty. Hits, runs, and RBIs set at 1.5. I'd say less. I don't think he's going to get a hit today. And so this would give you another positive thing to look at on your Prize Picks entry. You can also combine multiple sports. You can look at the NBA with the Pacers and Celtics playing tonight with quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types to choose from. Prize Picks is the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. We are getting down to the wire in the NBA and NHL playoffs, and if you don't want to miss out on any of the latest news, make sure you're watching Locked On Sports Today, a 24/7 stream on YouTube covering everything in the world of sports. If I Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube as well as on Amazon Fire TV channels. Now, Mark Vientos is looking like the everyday third baseman of the Mets coming up soon here. It's really interesting how this story has evolved because when we first heard Vientos is coming up, and we didn't know all of the requisite details that Wendell was getting sent down and all of that, my initial reaction was either the Mets were going to DFA Tyrone Taylor, which I doubted. They were going to option DJ Stewart, or what I thought was most likely at the time was that Brett Baty was going to get optioned down and that Mark Vientos was going to get the opportunity to play every day at third base for the Mets. Now, I was very excited when Joey Wendell was DFA'd. I thought that was great, and I like this platoon. I would honestly want to see some more of it, but the way this story is trending, it leads me to believe that they are making a decision soon here, and it sounds like, or it feels like, the momentum is trending towards Baty getting sent down because he would get an opportunity to reset in Syracuse and play every single day at third base. Heck, if you wanted to, you could even have him get an occasional start at second base just to see if you can add a little bit of versatility there. If your best roster this season ultimately ends up being a platoon at third with Baty and Vientos, to know that he actually can handle second base would open up a lot for you. I doubt that they'd start him at shortstop. I think that's always going to be sort of an emergency shortstop situation. And if you know that Brett Baty can play second base, well, then you actually can have Jeff McNeil be the emergency shortstop, and you cross that bridge when and if you come to it. I think it makes a lot of sense to send Brett Baty down. And when the move was originally brought up, Mark Vientos is coming up, and before we knew Joey Wendell was DFA'd, I thought it was Baty that was going down. I sort of laid out the options at the time on subtext to the Locked On Mets insiders and even on Twitter, I think, before we knew about Wendell, where I said your options really are DFA Tyrone Taylor, option DJ Stewart, or option Brett Baty. Because I did not believe the Mets would go into their roster and remove the only backup middle infielder. I didn't think that they would actually have the stones to do that. And credit the Mets for being creative. And I like the creativity. I overall, if you ask me what would I rather see, Brett Baty and Mark Vientos in the big leagues on a given night, or see Jose Iglesias up instead of Baty, I still am more curious to watch these guys play than to see a veteran journeyman come up to be a backup utility infielder. But you have to remember the development aspect here. And if Mark Vientos starts to push Brett Baty for playing time, and you start to start him against right-handers, and Baty's only starting twice a week, that's not the best thing for his development. He's got some real things to work on with his swing. Send him down to AAA. You look at their career time spent in AAA, Mark Vientos, man, he has spent 192 games played in AAA, 829 plate appearances. Brett Baty has only played 32 games in AAA, has 147 plate appearances. He was always behind Vientos throughout their minor league careers. In fact, when Brett Baty had his breakout in AA in 2022, the Mets were aggressive putting Vientos in AAA so each of them could keep playing third base, and Vientos started to get some time at first base, and long-term, that's probably the better position for him, but you can learn a lot this year. There's all this question about Pete Alonso moving forward. If Mark Vientos has a great season offensively, and then if by year's end, Brett Baty has figured it out, and he's starting to swing it well over the last couple of months, and he's playing a good third base, and each of them is trying to get as much playing time as possible. Who knows? Maybe at that point, if the Mets are sellers, JD Martinez is cleared out, and you have a DH spot open for Vientos, whatever it ends up being. If you get to the end of the season and you have knowledge that both of these guys are good, that could be your corner infielders of the future. And Pete Alonso could be sent packing when it comes to free agency. So getting as much information on these two is so important to the Mets season, and so important, not to the Mets season this year necessarily for the record, but to the years ahead. And that's why I have always said, have one here and one in AAA. I have liked both of them on the roster. It's fun, but I want to see Vientos in there more. I really do. And I don't want to see Baty be a bench player. So that sort of puts you in a position where you got to make a move. Yes, Mark Vientos is a lefty masher. In AAA last year, he hit 360 with an OPS over 1,200. Actually, that's this year's stats. This year, hit over 360, OPS over 1,200 against lefties. Against righties, he was hitting 264, 769 OPS. With that said, last season, Mark Vientos hit 14 of his 16 home runs against right-handed pitching in AAA. He hit 280 with a 371 on base and a 593 slug against righties. He had a 964 OPS. Now, he hit 400 against lefties last year with an OPS over 1,100, but still, he has proven in the past that he can hit righties and that he could run into baseballs against anybody. So I think Mark Vientos in the middle of your lineup, hitting behind JD Martinez, it gives you a threat. Right now, Brett Baty is not a threat in the middle of that lineup. And so it makes a lot of sense to send Baty down for a couple of weeks, see if you can work on fixing the leg kick, fix his pre-swing motions, his load, get him all firing on the same cylinders. And then who knows, maybe he's raking in AAA and you make the call back up. And at that point, maybe Vientos has floundered and you make the flip again. Or maybe Vientos is only hitting lefties and Brett Baty was down there and he showed that he could play a little bit of second base on occasion and you could bring him up. And who knows, maybe you play both of them in the starting lineup on rare instances, but you do get back to a traditional platoon and each of them can play on the big league roster, and that might be the best thing for the Mets this season. I think this is the time to make this move based on what we've seen, particularly the game today. Brett Baty just did not look competitive at all in the box, and that's got to change. He's got to work on this, and as much as you can say learning at the big league level is the most important thing, failing at the big league level consistently isn't always a good thing for a player's development. Having them get a refresh, be sent down. Even last year, I didn't love when the Mets called Baty back up in September. I want him to spend the rest of the season in AAA just to really work out everything with his swing and hopefully, go into the offseason feeling better about himself than he ultimately did. So this is a chance, I think, to give Mark Vientos an opportunity that he has earned. I mean, defensively, is it going to be great? No. And could Mark Vientos be playing 2/3 of these games where he's in there for the first 3 at bats, plays the first 6 innings, and then you go to Iglesias? Absolutely, especially if you have a lead. But he has paid his dues in AAA, and he's never gotten the opportunity to be an everyday player. So I like to see what he's got, see if he can really translate the AAA numbers and what we've seen early on with his MLB stint this year and be a really effective hitter, because that's going to tell you a lot moving forward about what you have in him. And Brett Baty, he can work on all those issues that he's got to hopefully get back to being the guy that can hit for a high average at the big league level and hopefully drive the baseball as well. So it's a fascinating thing to watch unfold here. Baty maybe has a couple days left to try to salvage his position on the big league roster. Maybe he proves us wrong and does just that. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, unless there's some news to break down or something else that takes me away from this topic, I want to look at Francisco Alvarez's absence for the Mets. Their record's been bad. They haven't really won a series, I don't think, since Alvarez went down. And I think the pitchers are really hurting from this, and the lineup is hurting from having his bat out of the lineup. Although, shout out to Tomas Nido for swinging a little bit better as of late and hitting a home run today. But that's something that I want to really dive into. So I'll be breaking that down on tomorrow's show. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, trying to make a push to 9,000 subs. So I appreciate all of you who subscribe. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, get our text messages, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second watch, head over to Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.